So now we move into the 70s, and what can we say about the 70s? I was devastated. My parents were withdrawn from in September 1972. We'd had Symington to stay for one of his first 3-day meetings in his new era. The meetings were entitled Dawn of a New Day. It was, as Frank Fowler said, it was dawn of a dark day for most of us. We love Frank Fowler, like many other ministers who were exterminated by Symington. And yeah, the good brethren, the brethren we loved and respected, were cast out, including my father. And in September 72, and it's very difficult to work out because there's layers and layers of hierarchy. And Henry McGackie gave the message from Symington, obviously, to withdraw from my dad. Despite Dad and Mum having been over to America, and Mum sat next to Mrs. Symington at fellowship meetings taken by Symington, so it all looked pretty hunky-dory. And McGackie rings Martin Edwards, and Martin Edwards tells Oliver Smalden, and my father has to be withdrawn from. He's told he's going to the Lake of Fire. And, you know, and then my mother in desperation went to see Angus Clapham because she needed to see somebody. The brethren wouldn't have anything to do with the household. Oliver Smalden and David Marrison, I think, who I've spoken to since about it, who was told that father wanted to go out, which is completely untrue. So the hierarchy were in control, but take someone along. My father had to go out and see them in the car because they said the house was leprous. So it was pretty bleak. My father had to sit back, and then 6 months later he was withdrawn from, summarily. And you know, that is the system we've got. We continue with today, layers and layers of hierarchy, and they hide the perpetrator, which was Symington in those days. Bruce Hales these days, he's the man that's been conducting my assembly withdrawal, but he only needs some nasty men to do it with him, and it's very effective, and it completely colours the view of the local brethren and the brethren in the area, and then the country, and then the whole wide world, because they have to go by the judgment of the man of God. So that is the problem. And they told me they told me that my father later wanted to go back on giving permission for me to go, and they said to him, "Oh no, you signed the document to say you could go in September." Well, he was in crisis mode then. You don't hold people to that. Oh no, hard as nails. And then father wrote in after 6 months, wanted to get back, and my heart rejoiced. I always loved it when people come into fellowship because that's all I knew. Now it's turned round. I'd love people to come and see me from the fellowship because I just love reconciliation. I love to make amends. I love to forgive my enemies, if you like. Love my enemies, it says in Scripture. I just love reconciliation. Even people who've been through the worst, been my worst enemies, or done the nastiest things, repent, and that's great. That's the glory of Christianity, that we forgive one another, love one another, want restoration when relationships are broken in on. So anyway, he went to Smalden, dutifully went to Symington, saying that father wanted to get back, and he spat on the ground and said, no, he hasn't broken his link with Leslie Turner of Doncaster, so he can't come back. So that was curtains for him, and I was just heartbroken, but had to accept it because I was told that's the only position, the only right position. A bit silly of me, wasn't it, to believe all that stuff? And and so it goes on. And then after I'd left home, I had a confession session and confessed to having been to the cinema once or twice, and Oliver Smaldon said, the leader, the priest said, how do you remember the date so clearly as to when you went? Because I was making a full breast of my confession. And I said, oh, it's in my diary. I just put OC for Odeon Cinema. He said, destroy the lot, destroy all your diaries. So all my meticulous records, and I had very neat handwriting as a young person. I thought to myself, well, why? But I thought that was the test that the Lord was placing on me, that I had to get rid of anything I took pride in, you see, and all my notes. And I never really recovered from that until about 1988 when I started doing diaries. And that was largely because Ross Anderson, who's died sadly, basically said, the leader, Oliver Smaldon, tells lies, so you best to take notes of what he says, then remind him of the truth of what he said later when he turns it against you. So, you know, that is the hierarchy, liars, deceivers, that have run and are still running the brethren to this day. And it's not good. And you might say, well, why did Oliver Smaldon tell me that Father had appealed? Why didn't he just hide it from me, that Father was coming back? Well, you know what? Because I think he wanted to tell me he was in control, and, you know, and Simonton was in control, and whether or not people want to come back, they can't, basically, unless Simonton says so, unless I say so. So, and then he would give me all this weepy stuff and say, I tried to relate myself to your father all through the 60s. I really did, lads. But I go back to Barnet. He's a Barnet man. His parents were Barnet, Hector. And if they lived through all this Nightingale stuff and saw that the rule, regardless of the feelings between a husband and wife, rules, that's what Smaldon was doing. He was applying the rule, the arbitrary rule of separation and withdrawal, excommunication on my dear parents, who were feeling people and wept. And my dad never recovered, really. There have been some kind people, and my dad was kind, my mum was kind to many, myriads, but I don't think he ever recovered, because when you leave the world to join a religion when you're 17, then you're chucked out when you're 39, 40, arbitrarily. It's, oh, I look at the visitors book, I've got their visitors book, then the world stopped. The world stops, mine stopped. When you're cast out from everyone you know, all you know, cast out from your business, all your contacts, it's like psychological murder. And I fear that the brethren don't understand the harm, psychologically, emotionally, that they're causing their ex-members who are as much brethren in Christ as they are, actually. It's just their silly rule book that's being brought to bear, and the need to bow to a dictator. So, you know, Peter Pridham confirmed to me anyway that Father had broken his link with LWT. So that was a load of nonsense, wasn't it? And anyway, the whole matter, when my father died in '98, I plucked up courage, having been rebuffed by Smaldon was still alive, to ring Bruce Hales at David Bill's house in Whangarei, New Zealand. And David Bill spoke to me on the phone and was like the go-between, Bruce Hales, and I just said, my father was withdrawn from for the spirit of lying. Yeah, Bruce Hales asked. So come 2003, December 2002, when Phil McNaughton came to our house from Sydney, he said, Bruce Hales can't understand the reason your father's withdrawn from. So by 2004, the whole matter was overturned, and all acknowledged in a monotone in the Leeds Assembly, as though it didn't matter. No talk about consequential damages or compensation or anything like that. Just we accept that James and Stella Christie should never have been withdrawn from. Brian Hanson announced it, I think, and things moved on. I didn't notice any weeping, and one or two came up and said one or two nice things, but the sheer devastation on my life and this was after they died. And so of course, Mother was still alive when I mentioned it to Bruce Hales, and he was very much in control of her death and burial, and gave an instruction to Garth that I shouldn't kiss her or anything like that, despite the fact that he knew that my father was wrongly withdrawn from. And then of course the whole review time was a strange affair, because brethren were told that they could come back, that they had wrong assembly judgments, they could come back, but there was no willingness to look into the reasons and dig down as to why it was wrong, because they're protecting the hierarchy, protecting the leader. And whenever people said, like David Marrison and others, said, well, you can't just say the leader was deceived. He should have looked into it at the time, not allowed the withdrawal. Of course he shouldn't. That's a big twist of the truth, isn't it? That he was deceived, in charge of all these brethren, telling them what to do, like Bruce does now, and then in years to come, oh, he was deceived. Yeah, we accept Lance Christie shouldn't have been withdrawn from, but the leader was deceived. Who by? Who by? He's actually standing in judgment against me, when actually the Leeds Assembly are responsible for what they've done. And according to the law of the land, the Charity Commission hold the Leeds Assembly responsible. That's Clive Anderson and his fellow trustees. Very, very, very responsible people. And they need to be very clear with me. Each of them should come and see me and say why exactly they've chucked me out and cut my life in half. David Stutterheim included. Lee Armstrong, who suddenly paid back all the loans I'd given him just before he shut me up. Brilliant, eh? Thanks, mate. All these young guys who don't really know what they're doing, they think they're being so holy because they're just dancing to Bruce Hales' tune. Sorry, if you're a trustee of the Leeds Meeting Hall, you're in a very, very, very responsible position, and you've got a duty to show kindness and compassion and love and give financial support to anyone you excommunicate, as per your agreement with the British Charity Commission. So the carnage, is shocking. And I just want to say that one brother who has spoken up very much, and I've looked into Nottingham history quite a lot, that's Mark Storry, who's a lovely man, and he went over his situation. I mean, he was chucked out in February 75, a bit after my parents, and I've looked into Nottingham history quite a lot in view of the fact that Nottingham was one of the main reasons why I was withdrawn from, because I was helping Ray Storry, and just before I was shut up, somebody from another place, Thaxted, asked me who could help them in Nottingham, and I said, Ray Storry. He's been through so much. The only reason I could justify the suffering that Ray Storry had been subjected to by the Nottingham hierarchy was that the Lord had something special in him, because he rebukes and disciplines as many as he loves. So I figured out that Ray must have a special gift for him to have to be subjected to so much suffering. So I pointed him up to this brother, and then I was in massive trouble, because Keith Birch is the man in Nottingham. They have to do what he says, because he's in touch with Mr. Hales, you see. So Ray was not the right man to, but that was another nail in my coffin. But in actual fact, I've looked into the Storry history. I'm great friends now with Richard, Ray's brother, who was, that's another story for another time. The way he's been treated, chucked off into places where they don't pay you, but just institutions, and the way they ran him out of money. His father was a great man, and Dick, good man. Anyway, to get back to Mark's story, when JHS went to Nottingham in 1973, Dick Storry, his brother, was doing the billeting, and Mr. Megaki doesn't want to stay with you. That court meant something in this political toxic world of brethren. And then later, I have a message for you, Trevor Bradford, who was taking the lead, from Henry Megaki: take hold of your tiger by the tail. Of course, Mark felt that the build-up was coming against him, because his wife's parents had been in trouble. And there would be swipes in the meeting, and Trevor Bradford's in contrast, you're going round in circles, Mark. And he could see the writing on the wall. This is what happens. And the way Garth was treating me, go and sit back just 6 months before I was shut up, you know. I said to him, but Father sat back 6 months before he was shut up, and oh, that's to his credit. Oh, I could see the writing on the wall building up against me. Mark had the same. We're both very feeling people. We've been sharing our souls with each other. And then Mark was accused of acting a lie. Well, my father's reason for withdrawal was the spirit of lying. Well, Mark was acting a lie. They knew he was truthful, he told the truth, but he was acting a lie. And then his mother-in-law had been withdrawn from for saying something about Henry McGackie, which she denied, and so on it went on. And then January 75, Bradford and Alan McCroft turned up one night to take matters up, and there was something happening between Roger Philpott, that's Helen's brother, and Catherine Frost, who he'd married, and they accused him of being social and liking them too much, and they were like jelly, shocked, and they just confessed. They just went through the history, confessed everything they could think of, so sincerely, and you know, they felt they didn't want to contaminate the assembly because they'd been made to feel how bad they were, and then they got a letter to say you're no longer fit for Christian fellowship, and they were in a dreadful state. Oh, and I know what it's like. It is. Oh, you feel as though when you're rebuked in assembly in front of those you love, you feel, and I know exactly how Mark and Helen, you search your soul, why am I so bad? I remember after my father's withdrawal from, feeling so bad, so useless, so, as the son of this evil man, I didn't think I'd ever get married. You know, I was thinking of a life of being on my own because I felt so crushed, so bad, as being such part of this wicked family of Christies. And, you know, then in desperation, Mark phoned Trevor Bradford, he slammed the phone down on him. And then, who came to the rescue? They, in the end, after they pulled themselves together, probably about 2 years later, they decided to go for a holiday, they'd just take a break. And they got to Bridlington to a hotel, found a letter on their table, who was it? From a father, saying, Mark, we're just out on the beach with Gerald Ellis and his wife, if you'd like to join us. And he spoke to Helen, dare we, shall we? And yeah, they went out and they became the best of friends, and my father and mother took a great interest in Mark and Helen, and they couldn't have children, and they had this history of being in the cult of the PBCC, so the authorities were wary about allowing an adopted child with Mark and Helen. So my parents went down to Nottingham and stuck up for them and said what lovely people they were, and that they weren't affected by the PBCC cultism. So the authorities listened to my father and mother's witness and allowed them to adopt a child, and they're still in touch, and they adopted another one a few days later. And then, lo and behold, in 2002, Trevor Bradford and Mike Fowler come along. We love you, Mark. We love you, Helen. We had no basis to withdraw from you. Will you please come back? Of course, Mark was so angry with the way he'd been treated. He'd no intention of going back. It's just the injustice of the whole thing, the awfulness of the whole system. And the 2002-3 review never bottomed the awfulness. And it's still happening since. So it was clearly a sham to trick the brethren inside into believing that Bruce Hales was the man of God. We thought, what a kind guy, he's reviewing history. But God was utterly misrepresented. You know, they blamed, when they did ask, they asked, the most they did was to blame John Sherwood, because apparently he confessed something when he was dying about some untruth. Don't give me that. John Sherwood was a lovely guy. And again, like Henry McGackie, who's been blamed for so much, they find a scapegoat who's died and can't fight his own corner and blame them. So it was still as wicked as ever that they're protecting their system, their wonderful system, the bride of Christ, you know, their wonderful leader. And, you know, on it went. And Mark could not go back. And then when Dick Storry died more recently, no one told Mark, heard through business. And then he rang Marlene, Dick's wife, and she apologised for not telling him. And they said, "Oh, Mark, you won't believe they've taken away my son Richard." She was heartbroken that the brethren had cut her off from her own son Richard. And then she died, and I think it was drink. It could have been a suicide. I mean, these are things that the brethren in Nottingham need to look into, and really throw themselves at the feet of people like Mark Storry, not Bruce Hales, and let him decide what to do. That's the only, if you've wronged somebody like that, you fall at their feet pleading for mercy. Now I'll credit the brethren in Nottingham for this. Ray Storry later reached out to Mark quite recently and said that Trevor Brad was a troubled person because of the way he treated you. And Mark went back to Ray, who I trust has passed the message back. I'm sure he will have done, because I trust Ray. And Mark's message was, tell him I forgive him. So isn't that's the spirit of Christianity. That's the moral victory, that forgiveness, that is really the whole point. And there are brethren, I thoroughly support Ray Storry in being a conduit through the wall, a troubled insider, reaching out to put matters right with an outsider, and the outsider reaching in and forgiving. That's beautiful. That is what will bring the wall down. That these people on the other side, these brethren, they're not so holy. They've caused a lot of suffering. And, you know, Marlene, dear Marlene, was found dead in her bedroom. It needs looking into. I think Alan McCross's daughter committed suicide. Oh, so it goes on. Nottingham for you. And Doncaster, Sheffield is quite as bad. And I don't intend to go into that right now. But the brethren in Doncaster, I hope by now, with my letters, are looking into things closely. And we'll come back shortly, despite the fact that I'm still waiting for John West to come back on the question of being married by the brethren.